several years ago when my boys were young, probably 4 or 5 years old, we went to my hometown for a birthday party in the park. You know, it was a picnic, and we had ice cream, and we had watermelon, and we had cake, and we had snacks and aunts, lots of aunts, and uncles too, of course. And at one particular moment, I looked up, and my younger son was playing with our new uncle. My aunt had remarried, and as I saw them in this kind of little skirmish or battle, the younger son had been captured, or the older son had been captured by the uncle. He had him kind of in a bear hug, and the younger son ran up and kicked him. Right under the kneecap, just wham! You could have put the football through the field goal from the 50-yard line as hard as he kicked him. Well, he let go of the big brother and started chasing the little brother, and we should have named him Dash and not Zach, because he was all over the park, up the trees, through the playground, around the picnic tables, under the picnic tables. At one point, he finally slides under the picnic table right between my feet. Now, I've been sitting as calmly as I possibly can as this new to our family, strange, grown man chases my young toddler all over the park. And as he slides underneath my feet, our new uncle steps around to the other side of the table, and he looks underneath there and he goes, "Get out from under there, boy! Your daddy's not going to save you now." He was angry at my son. And before I could respond at all, my older son, 4 or 5 years old, jumps up on the table, puts his hands on his hips, his chest out straight, and he looks him right in the eye and he says, "Yes, he will, because that's his job." Now, if you've ever wondered what your value is in this life, ask your children. They know much better than you could ever possibly imagine. That same young man, that "yes, he will, that's his job," is now 6'4" plus. He has been since his 17th or 18th birthday, and I have pictures of him on his 18th birthday sitting in my lap in my recliner. It kind of looked like he was trying to balance on a jelly bean, laying there all sprawled out, arms and legs going in every direction, because the two of us don't hardly fit in that chair. But it's an adorable moment to me for a couple of reasons. I remember when he was about 13 or 14, as I was working on this book, Live a More Excellent Life, I asked him the question, what is a good dad to you? Have I been a good dad? And if so, what makes a good dad to you? And I expected him to say, well, you bought me the PS3 and I have these new things and I have this thing. And I expected a whole litany of things in that list that make a good dad. But his answer was simple, it was short, and it was clear. Not only clearly expressed, but it was clear in his mind exactly what made me important to him. At the time, he was 13 years old, and he said to me, "I think you're a good dad because I still get to sit in your lap and wrestle with you on the floor." That's probably going to last as long as he's alive, as long as I'm alive. Because he's 19 now, and he will still tackle me on the floor from time to time. And we wrestle, because that's how he expresses his affection and his love. And I will give that back to him for as long as I'm capable. When we talk about legacy, which is chapter 15 in this book, leaving an inheritance that the IRS can't take away. There are many, many people, and I would love to be one of them, I'm not sure that I will be, who will leave millions of dollars in the bank for their children. They'll leave possessions of land and homes and all of these things, and there's nothing wrong with that. I heard a theologian once say, there's nothing wrong with having things as long as those things don't have you. There's nothing wrong with having money as long as that money doesn't have you. There's nothing wrong with owning possessions as long as those possessions don't own you. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I also believe, though, that if that's all we leave for our children, a broken family, destroyed relationships, bad ideas, bad learning, bad teaching, and things, then we failed them. Leaving them things won't make their life any better. If the values that you hold dear, the values that hold your family together, the values that you find to be the most important, if those are not passed down. Now, I'm going to say right here, I have a set of values and I have a set of family code that I have developed over the course of my last 25 years, the 22 years that I've been married and before I got married. They were not exactly the same values and ideas that I grew up with. They're a little different, but they have some of the same core foundations. But I can tell you now that I have worked very hard, very diligently, to pass on the values, the ideas, the standards that I have to my children, that they would live by those same standards, that they would live by those same values. I don't know how much longer it will be true, but I have a 19-year-old son who's been driving almost exactly a year and a few months, who doesn't yet have a speeding ticket. Okay, that is a gigantic accomplishment compared to me, because I had 13 moving violations before I got into the Air Force. I hope that some of the disciplined character and some of the disciplined nature that I have worked so hard to ingrain in my children sticks. I hope it stays with them all of their life, because I find it very, very important in the quality of life and the quality of people that we become. You know, that's something the IRS can't take away. Love for neighbors, love for strangers. I've raised 2 teenage boys that will, at the drop of a hat, stop on the side of the road and change someone else's spare tire for them and not even think twice about it. It's the kind of young men they have become. I want to see all of my children hold those values the rest of their life. Now, there are some things that I've said and done in their growing up that were not perfect. They weren't even good. They weren't even neutral. They were bad. There were years that I had a flare-up of temper where I would yell and scream and raise my voice to try to control everything around me. Those are not the legacy that I want my children to have, but I do from time to time see it in them. And I try to talk them through that when that moment comes. The IRS can't take away the values that I teach my children. The IRS can't take away character. When character is instilled in your family and those around you, that's a seed that's going to last a long, long time. Remember, in previous chapters, we've talked about time and talent and treasure and attention. And if you plant seeds of those 4 things, you're going to see a harvest of those 4 things. If you invest time in your family, there was a season that I was unemployed by not choice, against my will. I was laid off for like the 4th time from the same company. But in that season that I was unemployed, I became self-employed, and we were actually blessed and highly favored to have more income in that season, self-employed, than we had when I was fully employed. Now, there were some struggles because that income wasn't always regular, and sometimes we were spending the large amounts of money to pay off overdue bills and late charges and everything else on the seasons we had no money. But one thing that I did gain in that was not working a 40, 50, or 60-hour work week. I was home. I was able to go to the gym with my kids. I was able to hang out with my kids. I was able to sit around with them and enjoy the time that you can never get back. Our talent is another thing that allows us to leave a legacy. I'm not a talented football player. I'm not a talented musician. I am a talented communicator. I know it's a natural gift that I have received, and it's my job to hone those skills. So when I see that in my children, I look to draw those talents to the surface, to pull out what's important to them. My older son is not a great communicator. He doesn't like to communicate. He's much more like his mother in that aspect. They would rather be quiet and watch people than to engage in a conversation, especially with strangers. But the thing that he does love is physical activity. And we had a nice chat just recently about him going and joining a jiu-jitsu gym and maybe becoming an instructor in jiu-jitsu, because that would just light him up to know that he was capable of defending himself and able to train other people to do it. Find their talents, find their passions, find their gifts, and help ignite those. That's a legacy that you can leave behind to live out their dreams. Allow them to dream. Speak into their dreams. Speak positively into their dreams instead of saying that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Give them opportunity to grow. Give them passions to grow with by investing in their passions. Sometimes that might mean writing a check to invest in a football team, or invest in a class that they want to take, or invest in a musical instrument. But those passions will stay with them for life. And that talent, if it's allowed to rise to the top and take character with it, can make a difference between their success or failure in life. I know that sounds harsh, but that's very, very true. There are many people who are in the graveyard who took their gifts and their talents and their passion and their dreams to the grave with them. Don't let that be the people that you care about most. Time, talent, treasure. Treasure is not just the paycheck. We talked about that in previous chapters as well. It's not about the size of the 401k. It's not about the size of the life insurance policy. It's not about the size of the trust fund. While all of those things are good, treasure often is about a good name. How many people do you know who've had to live down a bad name from their parents? People whose parents had such a horrible reputation or had done so many bad things. I don't want to cast judgment on anyone, but can you imagine if you were in the world of finance and your father's name was Bernie Madoff? It would be really hard to live that life in the shadow of one of the greatest criminal debacles in the history of the U.S., pulled off by just a handful of people, but millions and millions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of people who lost their life savings and their earnings because of one man's choices. How would you like to be the child of that person? So as you think that through, I want you to think about the reputation that you're leaving for your children. Is your family name of value? If people encounter your children and they say, I know your dad, I know your mom, is that a good thing? There are people that I run into from time to time. Tom Ziegler is one of them. I ran into him at an event not too long ago, and we were just chatting, and one of the first things he asked was, where are your boys and how are they doing? Because they've grown up in that environment where they've met face to face with some of these people. Zig Ziglar's son is carrying on a legacy that his dad's name, character, qualities, value, and reputation built. And he's living out that legacy along with his sister. There's a lot of power in knowing that you've left a good name. There's a lot of value in leaving a good name. And my children, one of them is a mini me. He doesn't really have a choice. Anywhere he walks in, a lot of people think it's a younger me. But when we have a chance to serve together, people recognize the traits and the characteristics that I've worked hard to teach them. They don't always get lived out, but there are people around them that will call them on it and go, I don't think your dad would be very proud of that. That's not the way your dad would do that. I don't think your dad would say anything like that. And they help to apply that pressure. That's part of the legacy. When the reputation, when the name that you built, when the relationships that you have allow that outside pressure to come in and just reinforce that character and reinforce those values, that's a legacy. And that, in my opinion, is a greater treasure than the biggest trust fund you could possibly put in the bank. And the IRS won't take 57% of it like they will a trust fund or an IRS legacy. If the IRS knows that you have that kind of money, they want to take it as a gift tax or as an inheritance tax and put it back in the government coffers. Character, values, time, the escalation of their talents, the passions that you build into your children, into your friends, into your family around you, the IRS can't claim that. There's nothing they can do to take it. Attention. The attention to detail is one thing. The attention that we pay in a relationship, in the time that we're together. Others would say it, be aware. Be present in the moment. We've all felt that moment when we're in a conversation with someone and we say something and they say nothing back, or we say two or three things and we get an uh-huh. Or we say something that's really deep and meaningful to us and they say, oh, can you say that again? Because obviously it wasn't deep and meaningful to them. Either we didn't communicate it clearly or they weren't paying any attention. 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 Pay attention to what's going on around you. Sometimes a look, an emotional reaction that has no words at all, a droop in the face, a bow of the head, the slump of the shoulders, at the sound of someone's name, at a particular word. I remember there were foods that our children didn't like to eat growing up, and you could just say them and they were like, ugh, they would melt like a candle. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I think in life we have those things that become emotional triggers. And as parents, as guardians, as teachers and leaders, we are responsible for understanding, by paying attention, how those things impact people around us. I train communicators all the time, and when I teach speakers, that what they do in the front of the room is so profoundly powerful. I always close with Maya Angelou's quote, and I want you to understand this. From the idea of leaving a legacy, to speaking on the stage, to leading a group, people will very quickly forget what you told them. They'll even forget what you did. They'll never forget how you made them feel. And if the way that you pay attention, or the lack of attention, to other people remains at a low level, then the impact and the influence that you have on them is going to be minimized. And even if it does exist, it's not going to be a powerful, good influence. It's going to be a negative one. I want to read a short passage for you out of the book and then share the questions. These, again, are on the screen of the video, so you'll have a chance. I want to talk about a written will, and obviously, you want a written will that is a legal binding will. If you have assets of value, then have a written will, because if you pass without one, the government will decide who gets your stuff, and it probably won't be decided the same way you would decide. They have a whole different mechanism for deciding who is of value to you than what you do. I want to challenge you to write a will that is more in the form of a love letter, a conversation piece that really highlights the things that you want to be important to those that you leave behind. The values, the characters, the conversations, the attitude, all of those things that are deeply important to you. They might include aspirations and hopes, dreams, visions that you had for your children, apologies for things that you've said or done that didn't benefit their future, explanations of things that were said and done. Sometimes parents, as grown-ups, have to make decisions that their kids don't like. We don't like to move from one place to another, but sometimes jobs don't give us a choice, especially if we're military or we work in a career field where you got to go where the job is. There are a lot of jobs that they're only in a space for a season, and then they've got to go somewhere else. It's hard on children to leave their school, to leave their friends, to start over in a new place. But sometimes that decision is not for the children to make. And having to understand that may require them being an adult before they can. The idea of writing these letters as a living will sometimes is an opportunity to explain maybe why a child was put up for adoption, maybe why you moved 7 times before they were in the 3rd grade, why there was a death in the family and a new stepdad came along. Those are hard things to understand for little people. And as they get older and their ability to mature changes, their ability to comprehend changes, you may have to rewrite those letters. I recommend that you keep them in a safe box, a place where they can always be accessed if you need them right away, but a place where they can be held in secret, in privacy, so that all of the love and all of the passion can be carefully thought over before you hand those things down. Invest a lot of time in this. This exercise of writing these letters may be the greatest legacy you'll ever leave. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being the child of a C.S. Lewis? Can you imagine being the wife of a C.S. Lewis and all of the strange ideologies that ran through his head that he documented in his journals? Can you imagine going back and finding those 20 years later? How powerful a connection that would be? And maybe a Henry David Thoreau. Maybe a Pontius Pilate. Can you imagine what it would be like to find the original handwritten letters of those people? I remember watching a movie called Return to the Hiding Place. And one of the characters in the story was writing letters from the concentration camp on squares of toilet paper and mailing it out to his girl. And in the story, she finds this shoebox filled with these tissue pieces with the love letters of her loved one. I know some of the people who are involved in the cast and characters of that movie, and also the original writer and producer of that movie. And they studied their historicity so detailed. They actually found the young woman. Of course, she's not young anymore. This was a World War II real-life event. But they found this woman, and her son came forward with that box of tissues. And he said, it's not just part of a great story. This is reality. These are the tissues that came to us from Auschwitz. These are the tissues where he was writing his life away. And he knew his end was near. But he loved her so much he would send her these tissues. Can you imagine the value, the emotional value, the character value of having something like that as a possession? Man, that's powerful. That's what I'm challenging you to write. Not just a living will that's binding on the government. Not just something that decides where your assets go, but something that expresses the greatest, deepest calling of who you are, what your heart is like, what your life is like, what you want for your family. This is an opportunity for you to leave behind a legacy the IRS could never steal. Remember, this is not a one-time event. You've not had only one paycheck in your life. You'll not pass on the same bank account you would have when you were in your teens. Your understanding, your wisdom, your passions will likely grow and change over time as well. To those whom you write, they may become more mature, more capable, more passionate. After you've written your letters the first time, keep all of them in a safe place and share them at the right time. You never know when your last opportunity to write them will be. Start now. What if tomorrow never comes? The questions that are on the screen are the questions that are in the book. They're on page 185. I challenge you, grab a copy of the book on Amazon.com. Send me an email if you can't get one. I'll be glad to send it to you. I would love for you to engage with Live a More Excellent Life, to write a will for your family, to leave a legacy that the IRS can't touch. There may be days that your children would love to spend just hanging out with you, doing nothing more than being in your presence. Throw your arms around them. Forget about work for a minute. Forget about the negative impressions of your life. Forget about your bills. And just be present with them and love them. I am J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.